So thank you for all being here, all three of us. Chris has chosen the order, and by the way, in which way of speaking, he's decided he didn't want me to go last, so he can probably fire back at what I'm about to say. Anyway, Sam, you're going to start. Now, Sam's very nervous, by the way, but she wanted to say a few words, and so Sam, over to you.
Hello, everyone. So, for those who don't know, I have worked at this throughout my time at TJP. I started as an FA 12 years ago, and I'm one of the few people at TJP that has never changed teams. So I've only worked with Chris throughout my whole time at TJP, and it's been amazing. We've had ups and downs, we've had lots of people coming and joining, and it's lovely to see some old teammates here today. And this is why I didn't want to do the speech. No, Chris and I are very aligned. We think very similarly. I've learned so much from Chris, and I can only say thank you. You've been amazing. The parts that you guys don't see, so Chris loves...
cry now.
So Chris and his wife, Suzanne, where are you, Suzanne?
Yeah, right here.
So Chris's wife was here, who has been by my side for many, many years, and Chris and Suzanne love to travel. They were stopped from travelling because of the pandemic. The times when they did travel, when they go on their annual summer holidays to places so exotic I don't even know the names of, but places like Borneo and the Galapagos. Just amazing places, and Chris is so dedicated to his work and his clients that when he's on holiday and he should be having the time of his life, I get an email, I get a call, I say, Chris, what time is it? He said, you should be going, you know, what are you doing in your adventures? And he says, no, I'm just checking in, is anything urgent? Anything here or there? He's just honestly so dedicated. And the one year that he wasn't able to do that, I was thinking, something's wrong, I haven't heard from Chris. And he used to call in every day, and just the dedication to his clients is amazing. And when he eventually came back from holiday, I found out the reason I didn't hear from him was because he had no reception. It wasn't, I thought, because even, so hopefully in his retirement, he will be able to enjoy being away and doing things without thinking about work. And also, for those, most of you probably don't know Chris the way that I know him. He has so many hobbies and interests. I think his retirement will be more busy, if it can be more busy than his working life. He has interests, and he's always wanted to play the saxophone. So he has a saxophone. I can't remember, is it an alto?
Yeah.
An alto. So I said to him, and some of our clients are musicians, and I said, watch this space. They can't wait for the video of Chris's when you're confident enough to start playing and that sort of thing. So Chris has only ever worked 4 days for as long as I've worked with him for over 12 years. And Chris's clients still don't realise he doesn't work on Fridays. And on his Fridays he likes to garden. He loves to garden. He's got a massive garden. There's allotments and all sorts, and it's amazing. Other things that Chris likes to do that you probably don't all know about, Chris wasn't naturally into finance the way that he has done for the last how many years. He loves art, he loves history, he's got so many interests. I'm always almost worried that he's going to do too much in retirement. But no, I just think it's amazing, has so many hobbies, and I just want to say thank you, and just thank you.
Sam needs to go and take. I've actually written something out because I didn't want to miss anything out in all of this, right? And so So, standing here today in front of you, it feels a little bit, dare I say it, like doing a wedding speech, right? And I've done a few of those. Now, obviously, Chris is going to be standing here, and he's going to be wondering whether I'm like the father of the bride, who's going to reflect nicely on his life and what a wonderful and fantastic man he is, or am I going to be the best man who's going to give away all his darkest secrets? Let's just say it's probably more of the latter than it is of the former. So I've got some stuff here. I'm going to read some of it and ad-lib a lot of it probably. And here we go. So Chris started at TJP in May 2005. Obviously previously run Citron Wells Financial Services, and he came to TJP because him and Tim fell in love with each other on a corporate boating event, which is one of the stranger things, but probably quite true. And I think what is fair to say is that Chris has been a powerhouse of income generation for this business for 19 years. And not 19, 17 probably. And we should all be, obviously wouldn't be here today. This firm would not be where it is today without that. So I'm going to reflect on a few of those things as we go through this. So I asked the team to come up with some figures for me because I thought it would be interesting to see exactly what Chris has done. And so here we are, 18 years, Chris. You have actually generated fees of £19,120,000 for the firm. And luckily for all of us, he only kept 15 million for himself. And Chris's best year, 2017, he generated 1.723 million of revenue. So I think we can all say thank you, Chris, for that contribution to everything within TJP. I mean, ultimately, if we don't create income and we don't create loyalty of clients and we don't create that, we're going to go nowhere. So you have been an amazing force for good in that respect, and thank you very much. I've asked a number of your colleagues for their thoughts, which was interesting. And perhaps not a total surprise to hear that some of you described you as challenging, demanding, infuriating, stressful. But overriding sentiment from those people was that you have always been hugely supportive and hugely professional during that whole time. And I think that everybody can say that, and it's reflected in the clients. Your diligence of work, your loyalty to those clients and to your staff is unquestionable. Whether or not the staff have enjoyed your 90-page summaries quite as much as your clients have is also very, very questionable, of course. But you've obviously been very instrumental in building the careers of people in this room, and I'm sure they'll all be thanking you very easily through the evening about that. So I want to tell some stories, obviously, because that is the end to the nice and fluffy bit. And as you can see, there's a lot of pages to go yet. Much more interesting and much funnier and generally much more interesting. So I want to give you some of the comedy highlights of Chris. You may not think of him as a comedy figure, but actually the comedy has been huge. And I would like to thank Mr. Paul Kippin, wherever you are, for your excellent contribution to what I'm about to read out.
Thrown under the bus.
Kimmy was going to say some words, but you felt too nervous about standing up there. So what Kipps has actually told me was that back in November 2001, you interviewed Kippy for a job, and you said he wasn't good enough. and actually declined to offer him a position. But as we know, Kippy is very tenacious. And that tenacious attitude, I've eventually managed to get him a job with Chris.
And he phoned me up and said I'd made a mistake.
Well, you had made a mistake. And here we are 20 years later, and you and Kippy both in the room. And Kippy did describe you, by the way, Chris, as his big influence and his mentor. And I think a little bit like King Charles coming to the throne. This is very much like the right man, together with Butts and Sam. It is that they're coming to the throne at the right time, and they are very much in you in terms of the people they are and the way they advise. Now, so in that respect, they have a lot of your traits. Luckily, they don't have all of your traits. Luckily, they don't have all of your traits. So I asked Bucks for her first memory of working with Chris back in the CW days, and she said of his slaves outside his room. And around the walls were these massive blue files, and Chris had a huge desk which was covered in paper. Clearly nothing has changed in 20 years. He's got a huge number of files.
It just got smaller.
Kippy, by the way, has followed his example by having huge amounts of paper. Although I did notice, Kippy, you cleared those boxes from under your desk since yesterday. So well done to that. You know, people think that Chris hasn't moved on in terms of technology. Man, he can log in now. He's a million miles away from the guy that he was in the past. And although we will all miss Chris, we won't miss him as much as our paper supplier. Trust me. That guy has built a luxury holiday home on the amount of paper that we've ordered for Chris's schedule.
I would just add on that. So during lockdown, we all had to be ordered by Boris's work from home, stay at home. Chris didn't have his team around him, and he had to find out how technology worked, how we do Zoom, and all of the rest. And I have to give credit to Suzanne. So not as an paid employee, Chris did not have his team around, and I was on house party, and Chris managed, he loved house party, went really, really well. I was here whilst I was on house party with Chris, saying, Suzanne, I've just done something to the printer, can you go and pick it up? I've got this meeting in 5 minutes. So he's both have embraced technology as much as they could. Suzanne, thank you so much. It was really tough.
So in other words, Suzanne has embraced technology. Okay, here we go. So one thing you may not know about Chris is his fantastic recruitment policy. So if you go back to CW days, Bucky, Phil, Kippy and Dawn were all recruited from Chris. But I have to tell you that his recruitment policy wasn't perfect. Okay, in the first days when we first met with CW, they had some questionable members of staff. And the one that I remember the most was an infamous receptionist called Julie, whose passion seemed to be getting very, very drunk on Saturday nights and having fights. So the first time we ever met her, she came in with a massive black eye. I think it would be fair to say that we've moved up in the world in terms of receptionists since then, Felicity and Sarah and everybody else. So we've moved on. So we're going to the next chapter of Chris's life. And I think it's good to reflect on some of the things we will either miss and some of the things we definitely won't miss. And I think we should sort of go through those. So the things we won't miss, Chris, are your April Fool's pranks. However, I have to say that the piece de la resistance around that was when you attached Charlotte's chair to her desk with elastic bands. Charlotte, you're not here now. She's gone, isn't she? Yeah. She. By the way, if you've never met Charlotte, she's one of the funniest people you're ever going to meet in your life. Every day with her was extremely funny. Chris does pinch punch every first day of the month to everybody in his team. Every month. No, I have finished it. What did you do with the chair?
Well, there was a huge number of rubber bands that were attached to the leg of the chair and the table. And every time she pulled the chair out to sit down, it went back under the desk. And it took her ages to work this out. And then she pulled it too hard and broke the chair.
Chris has also been known for very bad jokes, which I think hopefully doesn't tell him tonight. And the best of all, very bad accents. I mean, for those of you who went to, I think it was Belgium, will remember his attempt at a Yorkshire accent in front of Leanne. That didn't go particularly well.
Leanne told me that was her highlight of her.
Yes, I'm sure it was. As we know, Chris absolutely loves a file. He loves files. Well, actually, I'm coming to the file in a minute. And we virtually came to blows once in Tottenham Court Road when we had built these new cupboards. And Chris virtually manhandled me away from half a cupboard that I wanted to put about 3 files in, claiming that he needed 20 massive cabinets to hold all the stuff himself. Just to announce, Chris, that on the 5th of November this year, you may well come to the TJP bonfire party, where we'll be building a particularly large fire, which will, by the way, include his collection of 1990 money management which he claimed to me were very important to keep because he might want to refer to them in the future.
Thank goodness on one occasion.
So, let's get to a few stories, and I want to start with this one because this one will live in the memory of everyone who was present. So let me take you back. About 5 people in the room. You went off to do archery or something, and you missed this great comedy moment. But for those who were present will remember this only too well.
Can I go?
So there in the middle of the forest glade was a telegraph pole. And on the top of the telegraph pole was a metre square board. And we were all asked to get together in groups of 4 and climb the telegraph pole and all hold on this metre board to complete the task. So, Chris was in a team of 4 and his 3 earnest colleagues had already gone up the telegraph pole onto the board. So Chris climbed up the pole, and I'm going to read how to put here, otherwise I'll lose my plot here. And by the way, they're all harnessed on, so in case you think this was really, really dangerous. So they're all on top of this board. So Chris climbed up very slowly, I have to say, and got to the platform about 5 minutes after he started climbing up, and got to the edge, and by which stage, as you can understand, metre board, there isn't really very much space. So he tried to lever himself up, and one of those people on the board was a young gentleman, a sizable young gentleman called Connor. Connor and Chris got very close. So Chris grabbed hold of Connor's legs, facing directly towards him. And he attempted to climb up Connor's legs. However, it would be fair to say that he stalled at a point, right by Connor's crotch.
I just ran out of leg.
And there he remained for 15 minutes.
Ball gazer.
By which time the other 2 people had got off the board, with Connor saying, "Please, Chris, stop what you're doing." It will live in one of the greatest comedy moments of all time. Not the greatest, by the way, because we're coming to that one anyway. Okay, now, something that Chris always thinks he gets away with, but trust me, we're going to bring it out right here, right now, Christopher, is the Christopher CB team party. Right, at Christopher's house, right? There's a lot of skullduggery goes on there, let me tell you. and your team have relayed some things back to me, Christopher, about these legendary events. Okay, so generally, Chris would order a vast quantity of alcohol at these events, clearly. But when his team asked for some drinks, there was always a very limited supply of what was available. Okay? And at one of these said events, his team asked for some Pims. Only for Chris to say, "I don't have any Pims and I haven't ordered any." When they went to the barn, there was a massive case of Pims hidden in the back of the barn, which clearly Chris used next weekend for his mate's party, and there you go. So Chris, if you think you got away with that one, we caught you out on that maybe. There was also an event apparently at Chris's house where there was salmon on the menu, and there were people who asked whether they would eat salmon, and some wanted an alternative. Now, it could have been a vegetarian alternative, it could have been chicken, it could have been beef, it could have been a whole number of things. We know you like shooting things, Chris, by the way. And, but what he presented was ox tongue, apparently, which didn't go down particularly well with the people there. So your summer do's, mate, have got a lot of mentions from your staff. But we get to the absolute piece de la resistance, the greatest moment in Christopher Bryans' career. You know, he's gone through this amazing career of building clients and running on this money, but nothing compares to this. This is his greatest moment. So I take you back 15 years, and Timothy James and Partners had taken a series of nights at the Albert Hall for Cirque du Soleil. And we had these boxes available to us, and every night 2 TJP people were asked to take 6 guests to Cirque du Soleil. Very successful this evening was, very successful. Chris's clients absolutely loved him. And when they left, he and his partner in crime, Mr. Kidman, were left in that box. But they weren't alone in the box. In the box was a drinks trolley. And on that drinks trolley was a vast quantity of drink. Chris turned to Kippy. Kippy turned to Chris. This looks like the opportunity of a lifetime. We don't want to be leaving all this drink in here. They emptied their rucksacks. They got some carrier bags and they loaded up. And they staggered out of the Albert Hall. 1 week later, Timothy James and Partners got the biggest invoice we have ever had in our history. But they had a fantastic Christmas that year. Chris, you've been an absolute key member of the TJP team for a very long time now, and it's very strange to be saying goodbye, although it won't be a full goodbye, and I really hope that you embrace life going forward. I know that you've got mixed feelings about retirement. Understandably, there will naturally be some sadness and perhaps even fear about what lies ahead. But you have left your clients in very, very capable hands, in a business that will only thrive in the future, in my opinion, and grow and be successful. You're someone who loves to travel, and I hope that the freedom that you now have will allow you to do all those things, and that you have great satisfaction. But you can always come and see us, and you can always drop in, and there is
on a Monday.
on bloody
Yeah,
Monday. Jesus, is he? I don't want him back that soon. But Suzanne, take him away.
Around the world cruise.
I'm not sure this retirement's working out quite we've got to all thank you in the room, particularly those who've been here a long time, for your massive contribution to TJP. It will be a challenging time without you, but we will survive and we will flourish and we will succeed. I'm absolutely sure of that. Personally, I have to say that Chris and I have had our ups and downs. I've found you incredibly frustrating at times, I have to say. Indeed, to the extent that I put here that I almost felt like I wanted to run you over in my car. but equally,
Slowly or quickly?
But equally, I have to say that, you know, I have learned massively. Yes, it is. But actually, I have to say that I have learned massively from Chris. And I think the one thing I would say about Chris is that he has often had a rather different perspective about things and a different approach. And we have to acknowledge that that has been successful. A lot of the things that Chris has done have been hugely successful in what he's done, and I have always reflected on that as a way of learning and hopefully developing myself. So in that respect, thank you, and thank you for the challenges that you have put into the business over the years, because no business will ever succeed without people challenging where we are. So in that respect, you've been a force for good, Chris, and I
I
thank
can
you.
ask you that.
I just want to finish by saying that you have the huge respect of our industry. A number of our associates and contacts from fund groups have contacted me over the last few weeks, either to question whether you are or that you are retiring, acknowledging that you have been a huge contribution to our firm and a huge contribution to them, and they're all massively positive and lovely comments that have come back. So we wish you all the best with the next chapter of your life, whatever that may bring.
Thank you so much for your kind words too. So I'll start with thank yous, and first of all I should make an apology before I go on to the thank yous. Something about Team CB, we're all a bit teary, so if I get a bit teary, forgive me, it's just the way we are. So I think my biggest thank you, before I go on to all of you guys, is someone that's probably not in this room. In fact, I know he's not in this room. That's Charles Jillings, who bought the company. I honestly think that had that not happened, we would not all be here today, because the pandemic was ruthless, and we would have had to have made cutbacks. It would have been incredibly difficult. So I really, really am very grateful for that. As usual, the Irish woman always interrupts.
Let's kick it off!
So that was my first point. My second point, to my lovely team. This is a TJP thing.
Suzanne, you're 12.
My lovely team, and also my past members of my lovely team. Some of them are past members and still working for TJP, but we've got some interlopers amongst us who don't no longer. because everyone else that hasn't been in my team has been essential to where we are today. And it's amazing when I reflect back on the few of us that were together back in, well, actually no one knows here now, in 1987 when I first formed my company. It was really hard work, and I know that many of you who've been here for years, my lovely people from CW Days that are still here today, it was really tough going. So well done everybody, my thanks and gratitude to you all. Needless to say, there's no company without clients, and I'm grateful for my clients as well, who have been simply amazing. I've had things which have really surprised me that have arrived during the course of the month, but nothing quite so much, as Suzanne will say, when I opened an envelope and found a photograph of Prince Charles. I thought that's a bit odd. And then I opened another box, and I found that I have a lovely gift of 4 crystal goblets inscribed from the King and the Queen Consort. Now, that came as a big surprise, and I'm not joking. But my biggest thank you is, of course, as Angela's jumping gun to my wife, for putting up with me, supporting me, telling me at midnight you've really got to go to bed, telling me at the weekend why are you working at the weekend, I hope your clients appreciate it, and during the pandemic, gosh, you were simply amazing.
Well done, Suzanne.
As Andy has so eloquently stressed, my IT skills are not quite in the 20th century, let alone the 21st century. And the pandemic forced me to a level that was well beyond my comfort zone. I loved house party. I thought house party was great. I loved gate crashing into other people's houses. And then that went. But the little Red Cross parcels I sent to Samantha every week of a pile of files that I had made up during the course of the week, and Sam was diligently turning up to the office every day to go through all this pile of papers that I was sending in. I don't know how you managed that period, but the paper manufacturers are most grateful. So that leads me on to the next section, and I decided I'd call this rock, paper and scissors, which I hope most of you are familiar with. Instead of rock, papers and scissors, you could say client-facing, compliance and operations, because those 3 parts of the triangle are the symbiotic part of our company which makes it happen. And if there isn't the cement and the sand in between those areas to hold them together, we are not a company. We absolutely need to have that in place, and I believe we need a culture of respect and humility to each other in those different sections of the business, because there is no business without all of those 3 parts, and that's an important message I wanted to acknowledge to you all. And that probably comes on top of the staff survey that we had. I feel I must mention something about the staff survey. So many of you talked to me about it afterwards, and I shared the pain with Andy in listening to everything that was said, and then addressing to a number of you after that our thoughts. I don't want this to sound negative, so I'd like to think about the positives of that, because it's too easy to look at the negatives. The positives were, firstly, that 90% of you actually responded to it. That was massively good, massively good. And also the things which you said that were very positive. It's a great place to work. You like the location. You love the people in your teams. You appreciate the professional development within the business and the support that you get. And you also like the parties, so cheers.
So again, I'd like to say sorry for that. I have to also say that I don't know what's going to be said in October, but I'm sure it'll be good, so it's worth hanging on for. So, more about me, because it's about me. The first thing to say about me is that I most certainly was born with a plastic spoon in my mouth. It certainly wasn't silver. From an early age, I was a serial entrepreneur from school days. I was selling everything that was illegal in the school playground. If chewing gum was abolished, I was the provider of chewing gum. And that went on till I was running a cleaning business while still at school, to clean the school, and that went brilliantly well. And then I realised I had to go to university, and I set up a sandwich business at university, and I provided, well, I think we've got some clients. Chrissy Hind, for example, is someone who attended the many gigs at UEA, which was my university. But there were many people that I got into the dressing rooms to serve them sandwiches because there was no other source of food. Chrissy Hind was vegetarian at that stage, so it was a rather boring salad baguette.
You served her oxytocin.
But the oxide, you're quite right, it's too expensive, so that went on, and then I graduated, all came to an end, and I had to start working properly, and I realised that this wonderful existence I had at university couldn't go on quite like that. And after a failed attempt to try and set up a business, when I learned all about cash flow and the importance of having money to live on rather than the promise of money, which you can't feed yourself with, I decided the best thing to do was go and work for a firm of chartered accountants and learn something about how to run a business. That was interesting. I hated accountancy. It was really, really dreadful. I loved the tax, though, which really surprised me, especially as the tax partner ended up going to prison. And the other thing I loved was that the firm I worked for had a special relationship with the stock exchange, where they flew us in to sort out problems with stock exchange members. So if you can imagine, this is the most exciting thing that an accountant can do. It's the nearest thing to MI5. You get thrown into a dusty old firm of stockbrokers to try and find out who's been embezzling, who's sleeping with the secretary and causing all the money to go somewhere else. So all of these whodunits was what I was getting into. And I thought, actually, this is horrendous, but I don't quite like aspects of the world that they're in. So I decided, after watching a film, when Woody Allen was asked to define what a stockbroker is, and said a stockbroker is someone that manages your money until there is nothing left to manage. I realised that actually I could do something better than that. And so I went to work for a company called Royal Trust, which subsequently, well, today is Royal Bank of Canada. And I worked in their financial services arm to learn about financial planning. In those days, there weren't all the exams that you poor guys have had to go through, and I do feel for you, having done quite a few exams myself. What I had to do is go to a firm of solicitors with £10 and swear an oath, and I became a licensed securities dealer. That's what I had to do. I swore that oath, and I thought, wow, that's my license to carry on. But it didn't sound good. I was always concerned that the financial services industry was too much about having lots of drink and going out for meals, and not very much about actually advising the clients. I think we've moved on a bit since then. And to acknowledge that, there was the 1986 Financial Services Act. Sounds very boring, and it was. But it created this new phrase, Big Bang. Now, I thought about Big Bang as I was writing this, and I thought, actually, some of you have never heard of it, and it just sounds like another bit of terrible, awful things that happened in the city. But it wasn't. It was the revolution that hit the city and started person to head up our financial planning arm. And I said to Mr. Hargreaves and Mr. Lansdowne, there's only 4 of you there, it seems so small. And the firm that I'm working with in London is that much bigger, and frankly I prefer to work in London. I can't see a great future for myself in Bristol. What a bad move that was. Never mind. That's the way it goes. So at about the same time I teamed up with a firm of accountants, I realised that banks were not the right place to go for financial services, and I thought going back to that hallowed land of accountancy and setting up a financial services firm, the firm of accountants would be the right thing to do. So May 1987, after an extremely good holiday, I went back to work for my first company that I created from scratch. And within 5 months, we had Britain's biggest ever stock market. Who are your competitors and set up all over again. So I had a pretty bad time doing that, but that new firm was Citron Wells. I started in 1990, and it was extremely successful in building up a massive client bank that ultimately transferred over to Timothy James and Partners in 2005. The only reason it transferred, because I did something else that wasn't very smart. I thought it was great to set up a new company and surround yourself with people who will be on the board with you, who are much smarter than you are, much older and much wiser. What I didn't think is that much older and much wiser people on your board are going to want to retire before you do. And they came to me and said, we want to retire and we'd like to sell your business, would you like to buy it? And I said, no, I don't want to buy me because I can get me for free. So that's when the famous boat trip happened, and I met not just Mr. Whiting, but Mr. Hart as well, and we had an interesting time. Somehow or another we didn't fall off the boat with all the copious amounts of alcohol that we drank. As a consequence of surviving that boat trip, we should talk about perhaps getting together. And we did, and I think that has been tremendously successful. Wind the clock forward. It was so tremendously successful, we had growing pains. So the period 2013 to 2019, I call TJP's adolescent years. We were trying hard to grow up, but we were adolescent. We were making mistakes. It was quite clear the mistakes that we were making, but mainly the mistakes that we were making was that we were just not used to running a business that was getting bigger and bigger. So the day-to-day activities went from highs to lows. Sometimes the lows were appalling. I can remember I can remember the occasions we had to dig deep in our pockets to just make sure that payroll went through for a particular month. So wind forward. We've now got to the stage, Waverton got us out of that adolescent period, and I now believe we're a proper grown-up company. So give yourself all a pat on the back. We work for a properly grown-up company now. But to get there, we had to kiss frogs, as Tim has mentioned in the past. And kissing frogs was trying to work out which companies would be the right natural partner for us. And boy, was that difficult. Some of the companies were really interesting, really engaging, and then something went wrong. The one that I was most latterly involved in was Succession, which I thought had lots of great ideas. Fortunately, we didn't go to Succession. Succession has now been bought by Aviva and crashed because of the huge amount of debt, frankly, that was behind that. So, if I can give you another thing to think about, there are a lot of companies out there, some of them quite big, often consolidators, they have a lot of debt behind them, and interest rates rising is going to be very, very painful for them. And I'm delighted to say that with Waverton behind us, we don't have that problem. So throughout all of that, I was also doing something else on a regular basis. Pinching the punch has already been mentioned. The April Fool's Days I adored. Gosh, I look forward to April Fool's Day every year.
We love them too, Chris.
And there were a few others that were memorable. I think one of them was when I decided that Tim's wonderful bit of artwork in reception with the naked lady, I'm sure you all know that, I managed to get some beautiful fig leaves, and I did my bottom bit, and I put the fig leaves in the appropriate places there, only to have Tim's PA at the time rapidly removing them, because I think he was quite disgusted that I had done that. I thought this was homage to Botticelli. I like my art, and I thought this was an appropriate and tasteful April Fool's joke, and I was glad it was noticed. But one of my other great ones was giving Ian Hart, who was in the same room as me, a message that Miss Lyons desperately needed a mortgage, and here was the number, please call her as soon as you get to the office. He came in, and he was a very loud person, and he kept saying, I need to speak to Miss Lyons, I need to speak to her immediately. And eventually he worked out that I'd given him the telephone number for London Zoo, and he was asking to and Joe, I don't know where you are you here?
Yeah.
Joe, you absolutely have to continue this tradition. Please don't let it die.
He will, don't worry.
I do also, though, feel that I now know more than I've ever known about what I do. And so it seems kind of strange to be retiring when you feel that you know so much. But I am someone that would be happy to talk to people if they need to talk to me about what they would do in a certain situation. So please know that that door is open. I would also say to certainly the advisors out there, but also the people that work with advisors and also in the other sections of the company. There is one thing I think you always have to do, and that is to listen to your moral compass. If you know that what you're doing is right, go forward with strength. If you're not sure, stop immediately. I think what I've tried to do is I've always tried to advise people as if they're my family. If I wouldn't say it to my family, I certainly won't say it to clients. And I've tried to use language that my clients understand, not the language that is the dictate of the Financial Services Acts. And I think that clarity and transparency is absolutely important, and it's always there in our letters, but make sure that people understand what we're saying. This won't go down well with everybody, but I think pigeonholes are meant to be for pigeons. I don't think pigeonholes are meant for clients. So I think treat clients with respect, that they are individuals, and address their needs rather than put them in pigeonholes. And as for right and wrong, as Andy has said earlier, it is actually subjective. We're in a race every day. Some ideas are right, some ideas are wrong. In the long term, the ideas that are right, I get this right in a minute, the ideas that are wrong in the short term might be the ones which are right in the long term. So have a degree of humility about other people's thoughts on things. Now, all of this is encapsulated in regulation, so it's getting very boring. It's encapsulated in a new regulatory thing called Consumer Duty, which is coming out in July 2023. Jocelyn, I'm sorry that you're the only person here on the compliance team, but I did want to put in that big point.
We love Consumer Duty.
You love consumers.
And I'm so sorry that Alex isn't here with you. So what will I do in retirement? I don't know whether everyone knows, but actually I probably didn't want to retire. It's ill health that's forced me to retire. I've got a severe eczema, and I've been told that if I cut down the stress I have, it might go away. If it doesn't work, Can I come back?
Don't look at me. I'm not answering that one.
So what will I do in retirement? I think actually you've probably heard enough on that side. I've got so many hobbies, it's unbelievable. I've got so many interests, they're unbelievable. And there are lots of things I haven't done which I want to do. There are charities that are quite close to my heart. I'm a fellow of the Royal Anthropological Institute, and you might think, what the hell is that? But it's one of the oldest now chartered bodies in London, and it looks after an academic section where they have no idea how to deal with finance and funding. So I'm on the funding committee of that, having spent 45 years as a fellow and done absolute bugger all for them. So that should help. I will hopefully be involved far more in the church. I hope I'll be more involved in other things in society. I'm hoping to look into perhaps becoming a magistrate, in which case I hope I see none of you.
Tim will be in there, trust me.
Pregnant pause, move on. Most of all, I hope that I don't lose touch with you. I hope that I'm absolutely passionate about TJP. That hasn't come out, it should have done by now. I think that you're in a wonderful environment, and I hope that you can last the course, because I believe that client loyalty is well rewarded in your careers. So I very much hope that I'm going to come into the office on the last day, but I'm hoping, Chloe, are you here somewhere?
Yeah, I'm over here at the back.
Right. Chloe, you've got a massive effort tomorrow because I bought all your cakes.
Are you working tonight, Chris?
I know, I won't keep you too much longer. So please enjoy the cakes tomorrow, and if you feel like making a contribution to a brilliant cause, please do so.
Thank you, Chris.
We are.
Raise a toast on an empty glass, but
just 1 second, I feel like to say something. I have, lucky for you, I have prepared a 40-minute speech.
My phone is burning.
Thank you to Chris for, since 2005, when we did meet on the boat, and we paid that £2 million, and actually listening to the 19 million quid later, that was a hell of an investment. Also, it came with CW, Paul, Angela, Dawn, who's not here at the moment, but a great, amazing... Phil!
It's very small.
Oh, Phil's here. That's him, yeah. I remember him, yeah. And a great, amazing testament that they're still here after what is now 17 years. It was a great purchase for us, and that business, that little business has grown to be part of the fabric of TJP. But thanks to Chris for an amazing effort in that 17 years to help grow what we are, where we are today. So I'd like to propose a toast, I know Sam, you're about to go for that, to Chris. Have a great retirement.